Right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of Dacorum Borough Council's Development Management Committee. My name is Councillor Garrick Stevens, and I'm the chair of the committee. Our vice chair is Councillor Fiona Guest, who's sitting down the front there. The other members of the committee in attendance this meeting are Councillors Allen, Bromham, Bristow, Williams, who's substituting. I'll come to that in a minute. Councillors Riddick at the front, Councillor Doris. We don't yet have Councillor, and we have Councillor Guest at the front there as well. We have a number of apologies. Councillor Hobson, Councillor Walker, who's been substituted by Councillor Doris, Councillor Wyatt Lowe has been substituted by Councillor Williams, and we've had a couple of late apologies. Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Patterson, who has recently returned from a holiday on the continent via a hospital. So he's into recovery. There are a number of council officers in attendance, and these are being led by Philip Stanley. And we have Robert Freeman. We have Colin Descartes has done the report for item 5B, which will be presented by Mr. Stanley. Andrew Parrish, who's doing 5C, and also on 5D. We have on item 6, appeals and planning enforcement. And on planning enforcement, we've got Tobias Fett here with us as well. We're supported by Jodie Edwards here, who's our solicitor, who will keep me on the straight and narrow, and Leila Fowler, who's stepping in this evening as member support, who will be responsible for the minutes and making sure we count the votes accordingly. We have standard items on the agenda, the fire drill. We are not expecting a fire drill this evening, but the alarm, if the alarm sounds, please make your way to the ground floor and assemble outside. If the meeting is extended, there may be a comfort break during this meeting at around 9 p.m. And before we start, please mute or turn off your mobile phones, which I will do myself shortly. Item 1, the minutes. The first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the last meeting of the committee, which was held on the 31st of July. The minutes have been circulated. Councillor Riddick.
Sorry, Chairman, I wanted to add the apologies for absence for Councillor Durrant. He's on his way from a hospital appointment and hopes to arrive shortly.
Well, let's hope he makes it before we get down to the first item on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Where are the minutes? Right. Are we agreed the minutes from the 31st of July are agreed? Right. I'll sign them later. Apologies for absence. We've already covered that. Declarations of interest. The next item on the agenda is declaration of interests. Please can I remind members to declare any disclosable pecuniary or other interest at the beginning of the relevant planning application. Any member who declares an interest will be allowed to stay in the meeting but will not have the right to vote. I also want to remind members that only those present during the entire debate for an item are entitled to vote on it. Public participation. I would like to remind members and the public about the rules regarding public participation. We have a number of members of the public who have registered to speak, and the list has been circulated. Our normal practice is to bring forward applications where a speaker is present. Whoops. You will be invited to address the meeting when the item you have registered to speak is to be discussed. The normal procedure and rules in respect of times to speak will apply. The time per speaker is 3 minutes, and where more than one person is speaking on a planning application, the shared time is increased from 3 to 5 minutes. And the 5 minutes will be shared equally unless the sharing of time has otherwise been arranged prior to the meeting. Ward councillors will be entitled to their own 5 minutes to speak, and speakers in objection to the officer's recommendation are taken first. A timer will be displayed on the screen, and times will be strictly enforced. And members of the public will not be entitled to take part in the discussion that follows the public speakers. I have the discretion to remove any members of the public from the meeting if they interrupt, try to engage in a discussion, or are abusive. For each application, the officer will present the report to the committee. Then the participants from the public are called to speak. Following this, questions are taken from the committee along with statements and comments for debate. There will be a vote among councillors which will represent the decision of this committee. And the first item on the agenda is item 5A, which is 00143. Councillor Riddick.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Chairman. I got a query as to exactly what this application is for, because according to the officer's report, it is an outline application for access only, nothing else. Now, on page 6 and 7, at item 2.2, it states it's for access only. And on page 8, at item 4.1 and 4.2, again, it says it's for access only. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Outline applications are obviously dealt with in terms of access, layout and design, appearance, landscaping. And this particular instance, we're looking at the access only.
Philip, do you want to add to that?
Yes, well, as Robert said, this is an outline application. So members will be therefore considering in terms of the detail, the access. Obviously, there will be there's a series of framework plans behind the application that will guide the future application of reserved matters. As a reference point, there is an item 5B on the agenda this evening, which is the LA3 reserved matters. That was exactly the same originally. That was an outline application with access approved. And this evening, members will see all the details, landscaping, layout, scale, etc., for that LA3 scheme. But this evening, for the Hill Farm application, members are considering an outline application with all matters reserved except access.
Does that clarify it to your satisfaction, sir?
Not really, because it does state purely access only in one, two, three different items. Nothing else, just access.
Well, as an outline application, that is correct. The outline permission seeks approval for access only with all matters reserved. But obviously, as I mentioned, as part of this application, there is the framework plans that sit behind it. There will be a list of conditions, and there will be planning, a legal agreement with planning obligations. So there are matters that sit alongside this application that need to be dealt with at outline stage. However, the outline permission only seeks approval for access.
Right. So can we press on? Right. I was going to read out the application number and a description, but I think we probably have covered that. Robert, over to you. Presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So as we've already discussed, the application before members of the committee tonight seeks outline planning permission for the demolition of the existing dwelling at number 36 Chipperfield Road and the construction of a vehicular access onto Chipperfield Road. The proposal seeks to establish the principle for the construction of up to 150 dwellings and an educational community building. The scheme will include the provision of housing, which will include 50% affordable housing. The proposals also incorporate significant areas of public open space as part of the illustrative layout for you. So the first slide shows the application site comprising 4 fields are located between King's Langley Secondary School, the A41. It also extends to the dwelling at number 36, Chipperfield Road, and the highway immediately adjacent to it. The site extends to a private drive serving a cluster of dwellings to the south of the school drop-off and collection area and connecting the site to Love Lane to the east. The aerial photograph shows a wider context in relation to that site. This includes a ribbon of development extending westerly towards Chipperfield Road. It also shows the site in relation to the core of the village on the right-hand side of the slide, the primary and secondary schools. The application site is not an allocated site in the local plan, and it is promoted on the basis of a site comprises a grey belt site under paragraph 155 of the MPPF. These are sites that do not strongly contribute to the purposes A, that's the restriction of sprawl of large built-up areas, B, that is the merging of neighbouring towns, and D, which is the preservation, setting and special character of historic towns. Those objectives are set out in paragraph 143 of the MPPF. The site was not brought forward through the local plan process, primarily as a result of concerns over the impact of development upon education provision in the area, and given a lack of an appropriate SANG solution, it is important to note the evidence behind the emerging local plan indicated that the site was potentially suitable for removal from the green belt. Now that appropriate infrastructure has been secured, this can be progressed in accordance with the officer recommendation. And the officer recommendation before you is to delegate this application with a view to approval, subject to the completion of a legal agreement and subject to the completion of an appropriate assessments in relation to the Habitats Directive. In considering purpose A of the Greenbelt, King's Langley Secondary School, despite being located in the Greenbelt, is a major development site under the Core Strategy and Save Local Plan. It's a clearly urbanising influence upon the application site, and the site is tightly constrained by built form and landscape features, including properties in Chipperfield Road, the A41, and these features are typically described as reflective of grey belt sites as described in the MPPG on green belts. When considering purposes B and D of the green belt purposes, the MPPG is clear that these relate to the impact on towns per se and should not be taken to protect other settlements, including villages such as King's Langley. We have seen this reflected in a number of appeals locally, including those in areas such as Abbots Langley, Bournemouth and London Colney. Go backwards, sorry. To the southeast of the site, you will see a hatched area indicating the extent of King's Langley Conservation Area. A light green area on that shows the grounds of a collection of heritage assets, including King's Langley Palace. I now want to move on to photos of the site, and I've got a number of these to go through, which are taken the landscape visual impact assessment from those of the case officer. And these take you from Love Lane. It goes into the first field, up to the second field immediately adjacent to the school, round to the fields adjacent to the A41 before finally ending up on the fields immediately to the rear of Chipperfield Road itself and the access point at number 36. So this first set of pictures shows the relationship to Love Lane. Taken clockwise, you have a panoramic photo of the access track serving the properties off Love Lane. Then on the right corner, you've got a photo taken from that driveway looking back towards Love Lane and a field boundary towards Love Lane and the pedestrian access drive from Love Lane itself in the bottom left-hand corner. As you enter the site, you have enter from Love Lane, which you then see the existing complex of residential buildings to Hill Farm, to the northwest of Hill Farm, and adjacent to King's Langley Secondary School, which you can just about see in the background there on the top-hand slide. At the bottom, you have pictures of the fields back towards Love Lane along the hedgerow of that field, and then towards the A41, again, taken clockwise. The next slide shows Field 2. Field 2 is immediately adjacent to the western boundary of the school. It's the top right of the 4 fields as you look at the plan. The area will be used as the farmstead complex, with the hedgerow dividing the site into 4 parcels being retained and supplemented. Next slide, please. These are views from the field immediately behind that one, and between there and the A41. There's a fishbowl image at the top of the screen showing the school on the right-hand side, the A41 in the background, and the boundary perpendicular to the school on the left-hand side. At the bottom, you see a similar view, but showing the boundary with the school and the boundary to the fields to the north more clearly. This slide's taken from the A41, effectively. It's the Google Street View showing the site. Just also to note there's a steep and heavily landscaped bank to the A41, with the site barely visible from the bridge crossing that major road. Finally into the field 4, which is immediately at the rear of Chipperfield Road and the gardens there too. The top photo is obviously looking towards the southern boundary of the site. The bottom slide showing the approximate location of the access for number 36 Chipperfield Road. And the final photo is of the existing dwelling and entrance from 36 Chipperfield Road itself. Thanks. So moving on to the details of the application. So this slide shows the plans and supporting information in respect of site access. Proposed entrance takes a T-form junction with appropriate visibility surface to the east and west shown in blue. The access track is designed as a tertiary road under the highways policy and will include a carriageway at 5.5 metres in width, a footway 2 metres in width either side, and space to provide cycleways or landscaping. The proposals also include off-site works. These are just some of the ones that are proposed, and essentially shows the provision of speed cushions to Chipperfield Road. Full details are set out in the conditions, but also include footpath improvements, signage, and public transport improvements. The site is a sustainable location for new development in accordance with paragraph 155 of the MPPF. You can see on this picture that the site is within walking distance to the primary school and secondary school, and the main shops and services in King's Langley. The scheme also makes contributions towards improved bus services, for which there are bus stops adjacent to the site. The application comprises 4 parameter plans upon which the submission of reserved matters will be based. So the first one of those is the proposed land use parameters plan. That indicates the extent of the residential, community and green-blue infrastructure, and also gives an indication of the extent of footpath and cycle connections and the interaction between the school and community and open spaces. The next one is the green infrastructure parameter plan. That builds on the landscape land use parameter plan and shows how the existing green infrastructure through the site is retained and improved. It also provides some guidance on relationships to properties in Chipperfield Road. There's a jagged black line there that shows that there should be a back-to-back distance to properties in Chipperfield Road. And it also provides guidance on the location of play spaces within public open space areas. That comes together in the next plan, the landscape character areas, which will include farmstead gardens adjacent to the school, which is a community growing and recreational area, meadow gardens, an arrival space, which is more formal, locally equipped areas of play, seating and alike, and the woodland area, which puts a greater emphasis on nature, wildlife connections and informal play. The submission also includes a building heights parameter plan that sets out the areas of the site that will contain 2 stories and 2.5 story buildings. And then we have the drainage strategy, which shows the existing topography running down towards the 3 corners of the site, with 2 attenuation basins and associated infrastructure being provided. The risk of flooding associated with the development is negligible, and the site is not considered to be at risk of increasing the risk of flooding elsewhere. So that results in an illustrative site layout, as shown before you. That demonstrates how 150 units could be accommodated on the site. It reflects the parameters set out in the 4 parameter plans provided and approved via the planning conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Now we have a number of speakers. Councillor Johnson, this ward councillor for Kings Langley. Speaking in objection, you have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Firstly, can I say that reading decorum contains no historic towns came as a great surprise to King Edward I and Queen Eleanor of Castile, who built a royal palace in Kings Langley, the remains of which can still be seen close to this site. Similarly, Edward II, Edward III and Richard II also lived there. Edward II built a priory next to the palace, which is still there, and Edward II's son, the Grand Old Duke of York, is buried in the 13th century church. Kings Langley, in other words, has not just historic but royal connections which can be found at every turn. The clue is in the name. Secondly, I was surprised that Kings Langley is not recognised as a large built-up area for greenbelt protection purposes, since Decorum have plans for an estate of 500 houses on greenbelt land to the north, abutting Manor Park and Aspen Park in Apsley. Similarly, a 330 property housing estate planned on greenbelt land at the M25 Kings Langley interchange, the largest settlement to which is unsurprisingly Kings Langley, runs down to Hunton Bridge along the canal. Building the remaining properties on Rectory Farm of 190 houses, all of which are on greenbelt land and run along the canal, is already underway. And finally, that part of Kings Langley east of the canal, which has been developed for housing all the way along the canal between the M25 and Apsley, ensures that Decorum's Kings Langley has undoubtedly sprawled into the residential developments of Abbots Langley, Nash Mills and Apsley, with a further 900 houses planned on greenbelt land off the road leading to Kings Langley Station, an area which Three Rivers District Council describe as Kings Langley. Turning to the issue of traffic, the report says at 8.51 that development should have no environmental and safety implications from the traffic generated by the development. However, the developed estate, the main route into Kings Langley and our main road network will be Vicarage Lane. Vicarage Lane has 1 lane in each direction and cars are parked on the westbound carriageway 24/7. There is regularly gridlock, especially at term times, as cars and heavy goods vehicles weave in and out of either carriageway in both directions along this road. This will be made a great deal worse by hundreds of additional trips. At the junction with the High Street, pedestrians crossing Vicarage Lane have no safe crossing point, and vehicles regularly mount the pavement and on one memorable occasion mounted the pavement and crashed through the window of a cafe. Making this junction safer is the Parish Council's top priority. At 8.113, the report states some pupils come from outside the area. As Chair of Governors at the primary school, I can confirm the school has a stellar reputation in Decorum, Three Rivers and Watford for SEM provision, and most attending the school from outside the catchment area have an education healthcare plan giving parents greater choice regardless of residence. The report also states other schools are within reasonable walking distance. St Paul's Chipperfield is 2 miles away and there is very little pavement in either direction beyond the bypass and lets you get to Chipperfield itself. Abbots Langley School is 3 miles away across a busy road and with the last mile uphill along Gallows Hill Lane. Again, the clue is in the name. The idea of 3 to 11-year-olds walking these distances and along these roads every day is ridiculous. There is a bus service along Chipperfield Road, but it runs Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and only once during the middle of the day in either direction. There is also a shopper service along Love Lane between King's Langley Station and Hemel, but that only runs Tuesday and Thursday, and only once during the middle of the day in either direction. This is in fact the only bus in King's Langley that actually runs to the station. The main bus service along the High Street is so unreliable, its timetable has recently been reduced from 3 times an hour to twice an hour to address this. In other words, if you haven't got a car, you haven't got a hope of getting anywhere from this development. Finally, paragraph 8.127 has a health authority acknowledging the impact of new developments in the area, which will almost certainly mean a new purpose-built premises for the NAP surgery, since the other, Haverfield surgery, is situated within a care home and carved to expand. The report quotes Bennett's End and Bovingdon, neither of which can be reached by public transport. My last thought is this: if only planners could, like the Health Authority, look beyond a one application at a time approach, since this fails to take into account all the other developers forming an orderly queue behind each other. Our residents can do it, as 240 pages of detailed and considered objections demonstrate. Thank you.
Thank you. Almost exactly on time. Thank you.
Practice.
Right. We now have 2 speakers, Cheryl Franklin and Lawrence Parnell, who are sharing the 5 minutes.
We agree with the immediately following statement by Cheryl Franklin that this site is not grey belt. The Council's draft local plan draws the boundary for future development around the existing King's Langley settlement. Hill Farm is outside that boundary. The local plan must be sustained. This development will encourage extension onto the green belt to the immediate northwest of the site and beyond, onto land we believe also owned by the developer. The estate spine road seems designed with access in mind. How real is the affordable offer? At Network House Apsley, 172 homes, and the Hemel Gasworks site, 483 homes, neither developer is able to offer even a single affordable home. How then can the Hill Farm developer promise 75 homes, 50% of the total? Against that background, plus the Council's recent fanfare announcement of its development investment partnership with Hill Group, we remain sceptical of the Council's conflict of interest denial. The developer's transport assessment commits to decorum parking standards. Inclusive of visitor spaces, this potentially amounts to about 500 vehicles and will have a massive impact on the local road network. The developer's traffic research is wholly inadequate, being carried out during just one lunchtime hour in only 2 edge-of-sight locations. No understanding of twice daily intense schools traffic, peak hours traffic, congestion in Vicarage Lane, Langley Hill, Common Lane, and at their junctions with High Street. The hazard of large commercial vehicles routing between High Street and Chipperfield. King's Langley School is 2.5 times oversubscribed, and the senior school over 3.5 times. Even with the developer's late financial contribution for 2 temporary JMI classrooms, no mention of teachers. The increased demand will exacerbate this. There is no consideration of the added pressure on local GP services, and we understand that the Sunnyside Rural Trust, whose participation was trumpeted in the developer's public consultation, is no longer in dialogue. This application should be refused. It is inappropriate and poorly justified. And bearing in mind the delegated officer's green belt Volk fuss just days before the Rectory Farm public inquiry, the recommendation that any future decision is delegated, be that of principle or conditions, should be rejected. Members must retain oversight and control.
Thank you.
Good evening. I have concerns about the development under this outline permission, i.e. the interpretation of green belt land as grey belt. Para 155 of the NPPF has loosened protection around village development and has been misapplied. Annex 2 of the NPPF outlines the purpose of green belt land, and this site fails to meet the criteria for exemption for 3 reasons, i.e. checking the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, preventing neighbouring towns from merging, and preserving the setting of historic towns. Kings Langley is a historic settlement near Hemel Hempstead and is surrounded by rural farmland. The pace of expansion here is alarming, facing a 40% increase in housing based on current plans. This development risks coalescence with Hemel Hempstead, turning Kings Langley into a continuum of urban sprawl. This is not what Hertfordshire should be endorsing. The assumption that agricultural land around Kings Langley is less valuable than elsewhere is simply wrong. This land is not degraded. It has been used for arable farming and is currently used for grazing, providing openness, biodiversity, and a rural character that Greenbelt policy is meant to protect, as per para 187 of the NPPF. If this development is approved, Hertfordshire risks losing its unique Greenbelt protected identity. Kings Langley already contributes significantly to housing and economic growth. We must protect long-term well-being and not sacrifice it for short-term gains. The promise of 50% affordable housing is aspirational. We've seen repeatedly that developers push back on viability, resulting in reduced affordable provisions and diminished Section 106 contributions. Creating a developer-supported farmstead for the school is an oxymoron. We support educational innovation, but sacrificing agricultural land to achieve this is illogical and unsustainable. The proposed access onto Chipperfield Road is suboptimal, dangerous, and involves the destruction of a viable property. The traffic assessment was conducted strategically in a quiet month and therefore underestimated the impact. In the last 6 months, there have been multiple accidents. Thames Water has stated there is insufficient capacity at the local sewage plant to support this development. Primary school provision is already stretched, and HCC has expressed concern about how capacity will be met. The report miscalculated the required expansion of the primary school to facilitate the development. This outline application is a strategic attempt to gain acceptance for the principle of development, but the principle itself is flawed. You, as councillors working on behalf of your local community, must reject this application, and I urge you to listen to the voices of local residents, councils, conservation groups, and reject this proposal.
Have you finished?
Just 1 second. The interpretation of this land as grey belt is incorrect. Let's protect the openness, character, and sustainability of Kings Langley for generations to come. Thank you.
We allowed the overrun because we were requested to tolerate a bit of an overrun because of her disability and speaking. Thank you. We have another 2 speakers, Emily Mackenzie speaking for Hill Residential and David Fisher speaking for Kings Langley Secondary School.
Good evening. My name is Emily and I am the project lead at Hill. Hill is a privately owned, family-run house builder founded on partnership and collaboration. Our partnerships business delivers affordable homes on behalf of local authorities across the south of England. We also build homes for sale on the private market. We have a proven track record in delivering beautiful, sustainable places. For the past year, we have worked closely with your officers, the Kings Langley Secondary School, the Sunnyside Rural Trust, and the wider community. From VR goggles and co-design workshops to apple pressing and chicken feeding at the Community Fun Day, we have sought to meaningfully engage with our stakeholders. This is testament to our commitment to quality and our collaborative approach. The proposals before you will deliver 150 new high-quality homes on a sustainable site that has been assessed by your officers as constituting grey belt. In line with the golden rules, 50% of these new homes will be affordable. We at Hill understand the need for genuine affordability. We have therefore committed to including a proportion of decorum affordable rent in our final proposals. We will continue to work with your housing team and our RP partners to ensure that the new homes meet the need of all Dacorum residents. The scheme will also deliver a unique educational and community facility in the form of a farmstead. Mr. David Fisher, the head of the King's Langley Secondary School, will tell you a little bit more about what this means shortly. The team at Hill wholeheartedly support Mr. Fisher's innovative approach to inclusive education, and we are proud of the part this development could play in supporting the children at the school. It is intended that the farmstead will be run by the Sunnyside Rural Trust, a charity with which I am sure you are all familiar. It will be accessible to the wider public on the weekend and outside of school hours, and there will be a cafe, a small shop, and spaces for hire. Via the Section 106, we will commit to delivering the farmstead to an agreed specification, and we will endow it with a sum of money to ensure its financial stability. We are certain that the fantastic team at Sunnyside will create an inclusive and welcoming space that can be enjoyed by everyone. We would like to thank your officers for their time and energy in reviewing our proposals, and we hope you can support the positive recommendation before you.
Good evening all. My name is David Fisher. I'm the head teacher at King's Langley Secondary School. I also hold a number of additional roles and leadership positions working with the local authority in terms of SEND in DSPL, delivering special provision locally, and family support work in local school partnerships for all primary and secondary schools in Dacorum. I'm also a governor at DESC, which are our local PRU. As you will be aware, I'm here to talk about the farmstead and its significant impacts. Schools across the country are facing a crisis linked to many things, including poor attendance, mental health, anxiety, additional needs, and external pressures. These are key issues of concern in Hertfordshire, and more so in Dacorum in particular, which highlights some of the poorest attendance in the whole of Hertfordshire. It is my strong opinion and belief that the farmstead would be a pioneering and unique approach to tackle the issues schools, communities, and in particular Dacorum face through strong partnership with Sunnyside, King's Langley School, and the developer. We can create a long-lasting legacy and something other schools, communities, and leaders will want to visit, so we can both showcase the unique facilities and offer, but also highlight how the support environment for children through the provision of on-site learning and therapeutic services tackles this present and ever-growing issue. The vision for the space includes dedicated growing spaces alongside health and wellbeing programs featuring therapy gardens and animal-assisted activities. This is not a bolt-on for our school and our community and would never be. I've been very clear from the outset, this is part of the overall facilities of our school. This first stage will directly benefit King's Langley School, but as the lead head teacher for delivering special provision locally in Dacorum, I want to ensure that all schools benefit from this facility over time. Evidence suggests that improvements to the wellbeing of children, a sense of purpose and enjoyment of education is likely to significantly increase attendance and provide opportunity for children that might otherwise move towards exclusion, not in employment, educational training, thus to thrive in the education settings that they're in. It is my opinion that the facility will offer a strong legacy to our community and leads to positive outcomes and opportunities to support young people to unlock their potential by removing their barriers for future life.
Phil, before we go on, there was a comment which I believe Mr. Franklin, Mr. Parnell made about conflict of interest. There's a statement in our addendum tonight, which I think we ought to read out so that's in the record. Phil, do you want to do it?
So the council is aware of social media posts relating to conflict of interest in the determination of this planning application. The consideration of this planning application and the decision to enter into partnership with the Hill Group to bring forward sites within council ownership are separate matters which have been considered by different officers and councillors. This application will be determined on its own merits based on the advice and professional view of officers whose recommendation on the application is objective in accordance with the RTPI Code of Conduct.
Thank you, Philip. Right. Members, over to you. Councillor Allen, and then Councillor Allen got there first, I think. Councillor Guest.
Also, in the interest of transparency, could you walk us through the rationale of green belt, grey belt that is being debated in the discussion so far?
Yes, certainly. I think what I alluded to in my presentation was obviously that there are 5 purposes of green belts set out in paragraph 143 of the MPPF. Paragraph 155 of the MPPF, which talks about grey belt land, relates to, under the definition in Annex 2 of the MPPF, is land that does not, land that comprises previously developed land or other land, and the emphasis on this one is the other land, which does not contribute towards purposes A, strongly contribute towards purposes A, B, and D of the MPP of those purposes. Purpose A is to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas. And I think there was a comment made by one of the representations that this site wasn't being considered as a large built-up area. That is incorrect. This area is a large built-up area, part of a large built-up area. Certainly Kings Langley is a large built-up area. But what this is not, this application is not unrestricted sprawl. It is quite tightly confined by physical and landscape features. It is also heavily influenced by urban features, so including the school and the ribbon of development along Chipperfield Road. For these reasons, it has been found in a number of examples in case law to be, and as described in the National Planning Guidance, but to be not strongly contributing to the purposes of restricting sprawl. The other criteria under that are criteria B, which is to prevent neighbouring towns from merging into one another. The emphasis in the National Planning Policy Guidance is that is strictly related to towns. Kings Langley is not a town. It will not merge with any other town as a result of this development. It is therefore not strongly contributing towards purpose B. Likewise, B is to preserve the setting and special character of historic towns. We've heard quite a lot about the history of Kings Langley and the background to that, but this development will have no impact on the setting of the historic elements of Kings Langley. Again, Kings Langley is not a historic town, and the MPPG quite clearly emphasises that towns are the areas that should be considered. So 2 of those objectives it doesn't contribute towards at all. That's a B and D on account of Kings Langley not being a town. And the purpose A, it does not strongly contribute because the area of growth is a logical extension there too.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just also add, there was a change in the National Planning Policy Guidance in terms of purpose A, which also states that villages should not be considered large built-up areas. So not only that kind of Rob's point that this is not an unrestricted sprawl, this is a logical extension. The current national guidance indicates that villages should not be considered large built-up areas in terms of purpose A.
The guest.
Thank you, Chairman. There are 2 questions here. The first one refers to the mix of tenure. This is the affordable housing, and decorum affordable rent has been mentioned, but do we have the figures for what percentages of each tenure of affordable housing is intended? That's the first question. Probably best if you take the first one first, then I'll come in with the second one.
Yeah, at this stage, obviously, with it being an outline application, we don't have full details on the location and size of the dwellings. There is an indicative mix within the supporting design and access statement And obviously there is the firm commitment in accordance with the Grey Belt Golden Rules to provide 50% affordable housing. What we continue to do is have conversations with the applicants regarding both compliance with the current local plan policy and the desire to address a clear gap in affordability, which is emerging evidence behind the emerging local plan. As you've heard from Emily and the developers team, there is a commitment on Hill's behalf to provide affordable housing that meets that genuinely affordable element. But at this stage, obviously, that is part of a much wider negotiation and part of a reserve matters scheme.
Thank you. The second question relates to Greenbelt. I see that in 2020, Stage 3 Greenbelt review recommended that this site be retained in the Greenbelt, but the NPPG that doesn't seek to prevent the coalescence of all settlements, just towns. When did the NPPG come out?
Yeah, the MPPG was December, effectively 2024. So we're beginning to see, as you can appreciate, quite a lot of grey belt schemes. And the guidance that followed on from that was clearly set out the approach to towns and villages.
Thank you. Is there anything in the NPPF or the NPPG that refers to villages?
In terms of protection, there isn't, no. Indeed, the NPPG, is, as we've alluded to, specifically says that these shouldn't be applied to villages.
I've got Councillor Allen and Councillor Doris. Shall we do it the other way around, because Councillor Allen's already spoken?
No, age before beauty.
Exactly. We're going to defer to you, sir. Councillor Doris.
No, that was unfair. Thank you. I've got 2 or 3 questions, actually, just relating to the document in front of us. Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service have expressed some concerns about water flow and fire hydrants. That's the first one. Is there an agreement that they are going to be included, and will they be included by the developers? That's the first question. In a similar sort of vein, Thames Water have actually made some quite positive or quite strong comments about the lack of sewage treatment, particularly referenced on page 89. And the third one in this trio, UK Power Networks were unable, as I read it, to offer an opinion because they were still waiting for some details and plans as described on page 92. Can you tell me if, and colleagues, if those 3 items have actually been dealt with now? And then I'll come back, if I may, with a comment at the end of that.
Sure. The fire hydrants, as is fairly commonplace among applications considered by decorum, will be picked up through the associated legal agreement. So we have standard clauses on water schemes and ensuring that there is adequate supply for the purposes of firefighting. So I am relatively unconcerned by that issue at this stage. Thames Water actually has confirmed that they were happy for sewerage works to be upgraded, and they can insist on sewerage works being upgraded under the Water Industry Act. So those comments with regards to the capacity of the sewerage system would be upgraded in any event under that piece of legislation. UKPN, I understand, did raise some concerns about whether there was UKPN infrastructure on site, which might be affected by the development. Certainly, obviously, the surveys we've identified and those that the developer have identified don't indicate any such infrastructure being in place. Obviously, if there is infrastructure in place, it's probably going to be thrashed out through the reserve matters application as to layout and design and how that might have an impact on any such facilities. But I think we need to probably park that one for another day.
Thank you. To some extent, that's a helpful answer, but it's not an answer insofar as what it has done is it's raised 3 points which have been discussed here this evening, and hopefully they will go forward with regard to the discussions that you will have with the developers going forward, having had these particular points raised and identified. Just a comment before I make my other comment, if I may. You've referenced Thames Water. Now, we know that in the public media, Thames Water are in, if you like, some level of financial straits. I wasn't quite sure from your answer whether Thames Water were going to upgrade their facilities or whether they were expecting Decorum to upgrade them on their behalf or the developers to upgrade them on their behalf. So to put it another way, who is going to pay? My final point, if I may, Chairman, is that, and I come with an open mind, absolutely, but I did actually look at the document that the developers put out about a week or so ago. And it all looks beautiful in that context, in the document. But it does make me worry, and I think this is a comment that you may hear me say in other places at other times. It all looks great now and in the next 5 years. But what's it going to look like in 25 years' time when the families that have moved in on day one have grown and expanded and possibly not moved on, but have possibly got and possibly not got their own vehicles and so on? How is the development going to hold the test of time and development within itself? Or is it going to just become eventually a jumble? And although I can't ask that of the developers here tonight, I hope that they will give some thought, not to the now, but to the 25 years hence.
Thank you for your comment. Right. I think I've got Councillor Allen and then Councillor Brum.
Well, picking up on that, the residents suggested that Vicarage Lane is not a very easy road to go up and down. In fact, you know, it doesn't really have two-way traffic at any time of day. Common Lane and Coniston roads can also get very clogged up, especially at busy times. Langley Hill can similarly get complicated. The turnings from the A4251 onto these roads, particularly Vicarage Lane, if travelling towards Watford, can be quite tricky as things stand. Add to that the fact that Chipperfield Road can get quite speedy, in my experience, and we've got a junction which is going to have goodness knows how many cars, and relating to Councillor Duris's point, however many more cars moving forward as the years roll on. There seems to be an awful lot of road, highways and traffic concerns about adding this large number of houses to the community of Kings Langley. And I wanted to know what your comments were about the impact this development will have on the roads and traffic within the village, and you know what is being done to mitigate that impact.
Yeah, the simple answer to that is obviously this has been reviewed by the County Council in their capacity as highway authority, who don't have any concerns or objections to the development. The vehicle movements associated with the development are actually relatively small and would be split effectively in the modelling onto a number of roads adjacent to that site. And that would dissipate onto the primary highway network. In terms of improvements, obviously there are substantial contributions being made towards upgrading the bus stops, including more regular provision of the bus to a 90-minute service. So that obviously ticks a lot of boxes from a sustainability angle. And obviously the site contains pedestrian linkages as well. And I've shown on the accessibility audit how easily it is to walk from the application site to a number of facilities that serve local residents, all of which should hopefully mitigate against the impact of use of the car.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, it may be a bit cheeky, but when was the last time Herts Highways made any comment on a development of this scale? Or is it the case that they are silent on the matter because they do not want to impede development by highlighting very clear and obvious problems with?
That's another observation, right? Not a question.
Well, there was a question in when was the last time Herts Highways commented on a development of this scale?
You mean adversely? I think you meant.
I can leave that hanging as a rhetorical question.
Right. Councillor Bromham.
Yeah, regarding the NPPF requirement for 5 years worth of housing supply against the housing requirement, and the NPPF requirement to achieve, and I believe we've got less than 2 years supply at the moment, and NPPF 130 says about achieving appropriate densities where there is an existing or anticipated shortage of land, which I suppose we have, for meeting the identified needs. It's especially important that planning policies avoid homes being built at low densities. So most of our developments in the local plan are around 40 dwellings per hectare, and except for the town centres, which are significantly higher. So I was a bit surprised that this development is only proposing 16 dwellings per hectare, 150 over 9.4 hectares. And when it was assessed for the local plan, they identified 24, which even that would be quite low. So some of the land is taken up, is being used for this farmstead, which we've heard is a very exciting benefit to the area. But even then, it doesn't seem to achieve very high density. Is there a particular additional reason for that? And could that density be, could that actual housing delivery be improved in the when the reserved matters are addressed?
Yes, so density would be calculated on developable area, which obviously doesn't fully extend to the 9 hectares, but I do appreciate the comment you're making in relation to the density. It is, from my understanding, around 27 dwellings per hectare, but which is nevertheless on the low side of density arrangements. I think what's important to emphasise is that that's just one part of the NPPF, and the NPPF also talks about good design. It talks about design that's in keeping and in character with surrounding areas. And obviously that is in an area of the borough where there is a relatively low density of housing incomparable to that. We can look at increasing the density for a reserved matters application if that is so desired by members of this committee. But as it stands, we consider that to be an appropriate layout and appropriate density for development on this site.
Yeah, it just seemed surprising, especially considering 50% affordable homes. I don't know whether they're normally designed to take up to have a slightly higher housing density. I do have another question, Chair. it's on a cycling and walking. This has been answered before, but it's worthwhile saying it, reiterating this evening. And that is that there will be storage for bicycles, and a lot of, I really hope it's really great to see the direct connection through to Love Lane, avoiding, so hopefully we'll have some reasonably safe cycling routes to the station. So it's obviously going to, quite a commuter attractive area for people commuting to London and so on. And so a lot of people will probably want to, because of the 60-metre altitude difference to the train station, I expect a lot of people will want to use e-bikes. So will the cycle storage have charging facilities to facilitate that?
That can be achieved.
Thank you. And the other question was, well, about sort of relating to the LC whip and again the safe cycle route to the station. There is down, so Vicarage Lane is a bit busy, but Langley Hill has got quite wide highways. Is there discussion involving the cycling and walking infrastructure plan and regarding to make use of the wide highways verges down there to possibly improve the safety of cycle routes?
I'm not aware of a conversation at this stage. I can take that away and seek to get that question answered for you.
Right, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this application demonstrates just how the ability of councils to control development has been very much curtailed by the MPPG's guidance issued last December, and we're now in this situation where we're considering sites that we previously rejected on the basis that they fall into grey belt, a very grey area, should I say, of definition. But one of the issues which rises constantly in considering these sorts of applications is the provision of facilities, particularly affordable housing, and how often that gets watered down once you get into the process of negotiating your agreements. But on the other hand, one of the key features of land being defined as grey belt appears to be that it provides 50% affordable. And we've seen in another appeal recently that the affordable housing was up to 50% to pass that grey belt test. If in, and this is the question, if in the discussions that conclude or are concluded as part of the reserve matters, it becomes unviable to provide the 50% affordable housing, then does the site fail to then be grey belt? Because grey belt requires the 50%, and therefore does it fall back into the more arduous control that the green belt status would give it? That's my first question.
Yeah, indeed it would. The probable slight nuance to that is that obviously under a green belt assessment, you'd have to consider whether there are very special circumstances that might put your development effectively in a position where you could be recommending approval. But we would strongly have good, strong grounds to defend certainly the commitment of 50% affordable housing, and any movement away from that would obviously materially change the assessment.
Thank you. And just to be, I'm sure it's very clear to everybody here, following on from discussion at the very start of this item, or the start of this meeting, this was presented as an application for access only in the demolition of 36 Chipperfield Road. But clearly this decision this evening will put in train a development of 150 houses on this site. It is everything short of a detailed application. So in principle, the principle of 150 homes on this site is being established by this application. I think that to say this is only an application gives permission for the demolition of 36 Chipperfield Road and confirms the access arrangements, slightly mischievous in the sense that it is establishing that this site can be developed for 150 homes. And I have to say, in relation to Councillor Bromham's comments, I would be keen that we don't increase the density, the number of homes on the site. I think we've already clearly outlined that there will be potential traffic issues with the increasing volumes, and this is has to be considered in conjunction with other sites which have already got permission or may get permission in and around King's Langley, because it's not one site, it's a collective effect of probably somewhere in the region of up to 1,000 new homes in and around the village, and the collective effect of that will be much more significant than the 150 here.
Thank you. Are there any further points that members wish to raise? Right.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just there's been a lot of discussion on the various points, but obviously, members do have to pay particular heed to the tilted balance in terms of the test as outlined. I just need to find the paragraph number. In Robert's report. So paragraph 8.141, planning permission should be granted unless the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. I mean, there does need to be a discussion on the benefits of the application. There's been a discussion in terms of the 50% affordable housing that would be provided. There's clearly the total provision of 150 new dwellings, which must be given significant weight when we have a housing land supply position of barely over 1 year at the moment. There's also benefits in terms of the inclusion of the farmstead and associated community facilities. And there has been a discussion on some of the potential harms. The density may not be quite the figure that members would like to see, or there would be a impact on the highway traffic. But the question before members is, are these harms so significant that they significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the proposals? So that is the question before members this evening. Obviously, this is a development that secures, as Councillor Williams says, this application provides the framework and the principle, but there is the opportunity here to secure a very high quality development that would be a logical extension to King's Langley, and one that would play an important role in meeting the deficit of the borough's housing needs position. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Philip. Councillor Guest, you look as if you're going to say something.
Councillor Stevens, the officer recommendation is to delegate with a view to approval, and as much as I don't like this concept of grey belt, which was invented in the current NPPF that came out last year, it's in the NPPF and we have to determine applications according to it. And as much as we might not like the idea that the villagers don't have the protection that we may think they should do, unfortunately in the NPPF that only relates to towns not merging, and the preservation of historic towns, not villages. So that's what we have to determine it by. So according to that, it will be classed as grey belt, and the tilted balance does apply. You might like the tilted balance applying, but it does. So on those bases, I'll be proposing the officer recommendation to delegate with a view to approval.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that if this were not to be approved this evening, my feeling is that it would go to appeal. And from the results of some of the other appeals that have gone quite recently, I'm fairly certain in my own mind that the appeal would be upheld and this development would go ahead. And I do take the point, in spite of what I said earlier on about the wider long-term aspects, just looking at it, this seems to be a very pleasant, very nice development. And for that reason, I will second Councillor Guest's proposal.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bristow.
Yes, Councillor Duris has rather beaten me to the punch. Whilst I do have some significant reservations about the actual traffic survey that's been carried out, I think the notion that there will only be about 80 cars during peak hours for a development of 150 houses is frankly ridiculous. That's the sort of thing that would be completely dismissed as appeal, as that's what Herts County Council have decided. This is a high quality scheme. We have a significant shortfall in housing. It clearly meets the grey belt test and it is 50% affordable. So with some reservations, I would also support this, but as I say, we no longer need a second.
Thank you. Well, I'm looking at page 34. The recommendation says recommended delegated with a view to approval with subject to completion of a legal agreement under section 106 and 10.2 has the following heads of agreement. So that's the recommendation. Can I have a show of hands, please? Those in favour of officer's recommendation.
Councillor Stevens, the addendum obviously updates the heads of terms, so that is what we're voting on, effectively.
Sorry, are we agreed with the updated terms as set out in the addendum as well? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Robert. Those in favour of officer's recommendation, show of hands, please. 2, 3, 4. 4 in favour. Those against? 1, 2. Abstentions? 1. I'm abstaining as well. Okay. So 4 in favour, 2 against, and 2 abstentions. Thank you. Officer's recommendation is carried. Ladies and gentlemen, you're free to stay or free to go. Colleagues, can I just say that in view of the fact that on item 5D, we have 2 representatives from Flaundon who failed to register in time, but rather than have them sit through B, C before we get to D, I thought we'd be kind and go through D and then press on. This is masochism.
Sorry.
5D.
Sorry, Chair, just we're having some technical issues in bringing up the presentation. So if you can bear with us 1 minute.
And if it helps, page 5D is on page 489 of the public pack. You mean without the presentation? Yes. Four, 8, 9 of the public thing. Okay. If you want the presentation, I can go and find the presentation. Right. Right, we're ready to go. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. That way. This is an application that seeks permission to convert an existing pool house into a residential annex at Bag End, Hogpits Bottom, Blaundon. So the application is brought before the committee due to the objections of the Blaundon Parish Council, and they have concerns that the residential annex will be occupied as an independent self-contained dwelling, that there is insufficient information to show that the annex will be ancillary to the main dwelling, i.e. dependent on it to meet its everyday needs, and the annex will not functionally be linked to the main house, could easily be severed and used as a separate dwelling. If granted, the Parish Council recommends an occupancy condition. There are no updates on the update sheet since the agenda was published. Turning to the location plan, the site is on the north side of Hogpits Bottom, as shown here, and wraps around the property Oak House. Sorry, it's a little bit difficult to see the size of the presentation. On the next slide, this is the aerial photograph. The site is within the green belt and is and as is clear, has a separate access track to the rear garden to the left side of the property. I had actually identified that on the slides, but that's no longer there. So must be still using the old slides. On the next slide, notwithstanding that access, the access you can see Oak House in the middle, the red line wraps around it to the left side. That left side is where that access is I'm talking about. So that, notwithstanding that, the site plan here indicates that the proposed access to the annex would be either via the house or utilising the pedestrian access to the side of the dwelling, as shown by the blue arrows. Turning to the existing and proposed floor plans, this is a comparison of the existing and proposed floor plans showing that it is not possible to extend the pool house building. Sorry, it's not proposed to extend the pool house building. Officers accept that the existing temporary accommodation was not the basis on which the lawful development certificate was considered. existing temporary layout is immaterial, as what is being considered is whether the proposed layout will be ancillary to the main house or whether it constitutes a new dwelling or a new planning unit, one and the same. That is what is being considered here. On the next slide, this is a zoomed in version of the previous slide. As shown here, the proposals introduce a bedroom and a gym. Currently indicated on plan is a temporary bedroom, 1, 2, and a master bedroom. Those are temporary uses and were not basis on which the LDC, or the lawful development certificate, was determined in 2017. The next slide is, again, the zoomed in part of that plan is the games area and a bathroom, as shown here. And currently, those are shown as temporary living, kitchen, lounge area on the existing building. And the next slide is showing a kitchen, dining and living area as part of the proposals, and currently they are indicated as a pool house, sunroom, storage and entertainment space. Again, as I say, those are temporary uses, and what we're just considering is whether the proposed uses would constitute an annex, or whether they would constitute a separate residential dwelling. Looking at the next slide, this plan clearly shows that there are no external alterations to the roof proposed. So that's existing and proposed, there's no changes. On the next slide, there are no alterations to the west elevation facing the track. On the next slide, no alterations would occur to the elevation facing the rear garden. And on the next, no alterations to the main elevation facing the pool. And on the next, no alterations would occur to the elevation facing Oak House. So, no alterations to the building are proposed. Turning to the photos, the right-hand photo is of the house and pool house from the rear garden, looking south towards the main road. The top left photo is the front of the pool house. And the bottom left photo is the pool house looking towards the rear garden. Next slide, please. The left photo here is looking south towards the main road, with the, in quotes, bathers fence on the left. The middle photo shows the fence that stops short and does not form a complete enclosure around the pool house. The fence is also open at its southern end, which is not easy to spot on this, but on the top left photo, at the furthest part of that fence, it's open. And the right photo of the pool house and covered seating area shows that the pool house area is open to the wider rear garden. So it's not enclosed. Turning to the next photos, these show the rear of the pool house, including the side access track to a gated entrance, which I referred to earlier, or the actual separate access. And on the final set of photographs, thank you, these are show that there is ample parking to the front of Bag End with a separate pedestrian access to the pool house building down the side of the dwelling. So, in terms of a summary of what is before you, officer's view is that the works could be carried out without planning permission. However, on the basis that the applicant has been submitted proposal is considered appropriate development in the Greenbelt under paragraph 154C of the NPPF because it does not result in any additions or external alterations that would increase its size or impact in any way. Also, no change of use is involved because the residential annex would be ancillary to the host dwelling for the following reasons. The applicant states that it will be used by an immediate family member, so it will be connected with the main house. Whilst there is that existing side access that could serve the annex, we design an access statement that states that the parking area to the front of the parent dwelling will serve the annex. Pedestrian access will also be through the parent dwelling or via the side access to the parent dwelling, as already shown on photographs. The annex and pool will continue to share the wider garden. The bather's fence does not create an enclosure that will be tantamount to a separate garden serving the outbuilding. And utility services will be shared, ensuring a dependence on the main house. As such, there will be a functional connection with the main house, and it can be considered that this is an annex, not a dwelling, not a separate dwelling. Therefore, no change of use is involved. Finally, condition 2, which is recommended, makes clear that the annex can only be used for purposes ancillary to the main dwelling. Whilst we don't think it's necessary to include that condition, because the creation of a new planning unit through change of use of the dwelling would result in the requirement for planning permission anyway, and we could follow that up with enforcement. However, for avoidance of doubt, that condition is recommended. Thank you.
Members, comments, please. Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. From reading the report and from the presentation, am I right in thinking if the committee were to turn down this application, then the applicants could go ahead and build exactly the same thing anyway?
That is actually correct, yes. That's officer's view. For the reasons I've given, that there would be no external changes, all the changes would be internal, therefore not requiring planning permission, and there would be no change of use because it would remain in the council, in officer's view, as an annex, not a new dwelling.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. First of all, this is not an annex, not by the Oxford Dictionary definition of an annex. An annex is a subsidiary structure which is directly connected to another. This is not. It is 18 metres away from the principal property, or 60 feet in old money. So it's a long way away. It's got a history, this particular site. This is a serial application which keeps coming back time and time again. It was originally started in 2016, and it's been through so many processes. We've had so many enforcements. We've had so many refusals. We've had so many appeals dismissed on it that I'm absolutely amazed it's still coming before us. I don't know what it is that the applicant doesn't understand about the word no, because back in November 2023, our enforcement officer had to intervene, and he said the following. He said, to be clear, the outbuilding cannot be lawfully used as a dwelling. The homeowner has been made aware of this fact in no uncertain terms. And yet here we are, it keeps coming back time and time again, trying to get this as a so-called annexed granny flat, whatever you call it. If it's a granny flat, it's the most luxurious one I've ever seen. It's got its own private gym, which is a bit ridiculous. So it was refused last year. There's a copy of the refusal which Philip signed on the 25th of March, and it was appealed. The appeal was dismissed on the 3rd of February this year, all for the same reasons. So I just cannot understand why we are considering these things now. It's just totally inappropriate. It's in the green belt, and it's in, well, not quite in the conservation area, but right on the edge of the conservation area of the village as well. So I would recommend that we refuse the application. Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
Well, I was going to tease out some of those themes just to be clear in my own mind without knowing the history as Councillor Riddick does. So the proposal is that this house would be occupied by one of the residents of the main house and permanently occupied. Is it, or is it that it's a guest room? But what is the?
We are told by the applicant that is what it would be. It would be occupied by a family member.
Right. And so what is, in planning terms, what is the distinction between having a member of the household live there permanently and have somebody completely separate to the household live there permanently? What is the distinction in planning?
Well, you could have someone completely separate to the household living there, such as a carer, as long as they're not using it as an independent dwelling, as long as it's still connected to Bag End.
Right, but could it, I presume the residents, local neighbours' concerns are that this gets rented out as a separate dwelling or Airbnb or something like that. Is there any distinction between that usage of this building and its usage for a family member?
I mean, there will be a combination of things. If a change of use did occur, then we would we could investigate whether the connectivity with the existing dwelling remains, whether it shares services still, whether it has an enclosed garden or anything. There's a variety of things we could look at, whether it's decided that it's now going to start using a separate parking area to the side. There are sort of various things, and whether it's paying separate rates as well.
Right, and separate utilities and so on.
Yeah.
Which is all quite tricky to enforce, isn't it? I mean, without putting a drone up there and putting surveillance on the house, it's very difficult for the authority to be able to identify whether it's being used by a separate individual from the household or somebody within the household.
Well, we can make further investigations into that. We don't have to just look at it from the air. We can actually enter the property, and if we suspect there is a breach of planning permission, we can actually, and there's a change of use, then we can investigate further. And
so I'm glad that
planning conservation notice.
Sorry, Chair, if I'm okay to carry on. I'm just a little bit confused because it's been refused previously, according to Councillor Riddick and the paperwork and history trail, on the basis that it's not a dwelling, and yet this is being brought forward for it to be potentially permanently occupied by somebody as if it were a dwelling, even if it is not independent of the original household. So there seems to be some distinction about whether it's a dwelling for somebody independent of the household or a dwelling for somebody within the household. And if it's for somebody within the household, then all's well and good. And if it's for somebody independent of the household, then it becomes, has a different status in some way. I'm a bit lost as to that distinction.
Well, I think one of the aspects that we need to look at is the fact that it's come in as conversion of full house to an annex. It's not, and it's come in under the householder application type of application. It's not coming as a full application, which would, which the appeal was considering, which was a full application for a dwelling, as I understand. So it's not the same type of application. It's a full householder application that, in our view, doesn't mean that it's it doesn't ring any bells to say that it's going to be a dwelling. But if it is converted to a dwelling for any reason, we can take further action at the appropriate time. So despite that, we do feel that because it's only internal alterations, no external alterations, and that there is some dependence on the main dwelling, that it remains an annex, is not a change of use.
So your recommendation to approve is on the basis that there are no grounds for being able to refuse it because the changes are all internal, and that is not something that the planning process can interfere with. However, if there were to be breaches of the status of the house, of that building rather, subsequently, then the authority would be able to apply a different avenue of surveillance and enforcement.
That would be correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and indeed, as Councillor Riddick pointed out, an application was refused and the appeal was dismissed in February this year for an independent dwelling on the site. That would have been a wholly separated unit. It would, in all likelihood, have its own access. It would have created a new postal address. It would have separated utility bills. The occupiers would have had no functional connection with the main house. The application before members this evening is for none of that. It's for a functionally related annex with no separation of postal address, access, garden enclosures. It would be possible for the occupiers of both to come and go on each other's because they're family members. So it's a connected property, whereas the dismissed appeal would have created a very distinct, separate unit.
And so we're being encouraged to approve on the basis that this is completely separate to past, complete different application to previous applications, and the enforcement would be triggered if it was to slip back into past patterns. Thank you, that's really helpful. Thank you, Chair, for your indulgence.
Before we move on, can I just ask a question? Condition 2 says ancillary to the residential use of the dwelling, known as. Could we tighten that up and say ancillary to, and with a family connection or something like that? A member of the family. So that it links it more tightly to the existing ownership. That gets around the Airbnb type situation.
I mean, there are instances where, for example, carers can be considered ancillary, so it's not a direct family member. And fundamentally, I'm not sure it meets the test of necessity to restrict it in that way, because as we've discussed, there are enforcement powers we can deal with should it transpire that the occupiers of the annex are living completely independently and have created their own utility bill. So we do have powers to deal with that issue.
I've got Councillor Bromham first and then Councillor Durrett.
So just to reiterate, if even if this application is approved or not, and either way, and the works go ahead, and then it's observed that that annex is the pool room is advertised for bed and breakfast usage, would that be grounds for enforcement?
I think that would constitute change of use. I'm not sure which use class it would come under.
Yeah, it'd certainly be grounds for an enforcement investigation. We would need to look at obviously all the facts. But at that kind of basic level, that would appear to be a breach that we would deal with.
This is one of those situations, and we've seen them so many times before, where you have to take the judgment on what's in front of you today and not what might turn out to be in X period of time in the future. But that's the way it is. I just wonder, and I'm sort of floating this as a thought, that if we were to approve this, to try and protect the status of the building, as I think you've mentioned, Garrick, could we impose or remove any permitted development rights that would actually say, yes, okay, you can build it as it is now, but you can't do anything else with it, either internally or externally, so it is what it is. So if you like, it future-proofs it against development.
Yeah, because it would be, and it will come under Class E. But
Yeah, I mean, we're debating whether, because it's obviously not the main dwelling, and therefore whether it would be a Class E outbuilding structure, which would therefore not have planning permission. It would require, if it to be extended, that would in itself require an application. I mean, the difficulty, of course, here is that the starting point officers are saying that this isn't development requiring planning permission. Although obviously the applicant has submitted the application and members have to consider on its merits, officers have reached the view that it's not development. As Andrew's indicated, there's no external changes, and there's no material change to the character of the use, which are the two tests of whether it's development or not. So as such, imposing conditions relating to further extensions may not meet the test of necessity either. But I think fundamentally as a Class E structure, further extensions would need planning permission.
So any change with planning permission, and that would also take us back to now, albeit that they would have had the planning application and for us today.
Can you put your mic on?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry. My apologies.
So Andrew's just checking the history of the site and whether permitted development rights were removed in earlier applications.
Ah, okay. I mean, it does, looking at the drawings, both on the ground floor, it does make you feel that the layout of the as proposed lends itself to a number of different, shall we say, soft alterations.
Absolutely.
So if the annex is considered part of the main dwelling, then Andrew has established that Class A and B have already been removed. If it's considered an outbuilding, then under Class E, then my understanding is, though I can't open the GPDO, is that under the extension of the Class E structure would require planning permission. So I think it's caught either way through the Class E restrictions or the removal of Class A or B, A and B.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further comments? No. Well, I think Councillor Doris reminded us that what we're doing, in fact, is making a judgment on the planning application in front of us. Those in favour of officer's recommendation, please. Do I have a proposer in favour of officer's recommendation? Councillor Bristow. Councillor Guest.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Those in favour of officer's recommendation, show of hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 in favour. Against. Right, and I'm going to abstain. And that took a bit longer than I thought we might do, but exercise the brain cells a bit. Thank you. Right. Swiftly on and back to the agenda. Item 5B. It's on page 287. And as at 9 o'clock, and as we had a break 40 minutes ago, I'm hoping that we can carry on. Members?
Agreed. Agreed. Chairman, I must declare an interest here because I have been opposed to development in principle on this site since 1996. So I can't come to this application with an open mind, so I'll take no part in this item.
Thank you for your declaration. Right. 5B. Philip, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is one of 3 reserved matters application relating to the LA3 land at West Hemel Hempstead, and I'll provide a plan that shows the geographic areas of the 3, and the one that is before members this evening. It's before members as it relates to details of a large-scale major development which is linked to an existing Section 106 agreement. There are no late items in the addendum. However, I do need to amend condition 2 on the report because there is no implementation clause. It simply requires the submission of details, but clearly we do need to insist that the approved details are implemented. So I would like to add the details shall be implemented as approved and thereafter maintained to condition 2. So moving on to the first slide. It simply, this provides a little bit of context. The site has been identified for development since 2013, with the principle of the overall quantum of development on site being established in 2021. It's a very important site as part of the borough meeting its housing needs. And this is, as I said, one of the 3 reserved matters applications that we have received. The first one granted in July, and the third one to be presented to members in the next committee. Thank you. So on the left, we can see outlined in blue the application, the wider application site, and then the parcels outlined in red, forming the central and southern parts of the wider site. That's the area under consideration this evening. The picture on the right simply shows the location of the site in the context of Hemel Hempstead. And here is a further detail of the split and reserved matters applications. The blue is the Taylor Wimpey's reserved matters that members approved in July, and the yellow is the sites before members this evening, and the red would be the third application in September. As the case officer indicated in the July committee, the reserved matters have been based on the parameter plans that were agreed as part of the hybrid of the original planning permission, and the scheme has been assessed against them. So this includes the land use parameter plan, the land movement parameter plan, and the land movement parameter plan established the access from the avenue and Long Chorlton. Next, we have the approved green infrastructure parameter plan, highlighting the green corridor links across the site. The approved hydrology parameter plan. So, as I said, that's the starting point, and the officer's view is that this reserved matters has paid heed to those parameter plans in the creation of the full detail that's before members this evening, which is shown in the next slide. So here we can see the proposed layout of the development, and which corresponds closely to the illustrative master plan at the outline stage, and maintains the main movement routes established by the movement parameter plan. Next slide. I've just annotated that plan to assist members. It's difficult to see, but underneath the blue dots there is an orange hash line. That's a public right of way, and the blue dots simply indicate the photo locations that are to follow. The blue star on the left-hand side is where the public right-of-way meets Pouchenen Lane. And the red triangles are the location of the blocks of flats. So there are 5 blocks of flats proposed amongst the housing mix. So to assist members, they're highlighted there. Moving on to the photographs. Phase 1, so the original permission included it was a hybrid application. It had detailed consent and outline consent. So this, the detailed consent of the original permission is in the process of being constructed. So that's the view from Long Chorlton, kind of opposite the adventure playground. And then the next photos, again, we can see some further construction works at the end of the avenue. In terms of this particular site, on the right-hand side, you can see where we are with the red star. Pouchinen Lane is densely landscaped and concealing the site really from that road. And where the star is, that's where you can turn off that road and go onto a public right-of-way, which the next photo so now we're into the site, looking across towards the northeast. Next. And looking in the opposite direction down towards the south. And then moving further along that public right-of-way, again, it in itself becomes treed on either side. There is a telecoms facility along that public right-of-way, which would be retained. And then moving towards the end, we can have the view south and the view north, where we can see the road that would come through to this part of the site. And a further view to the southeast, where we can see the existing children dwellings through the trees. And a final photograph showing the site there. So in terms of the housing mix for this reserve matters, we can see that overall there's a 40% affordable rent, 40% affordable housing, split 75% and 25% between affordable rent and shared ownership. And there's been a considerable efforts of officers together with the council's housing team to ensure that the larger units are incorporated within the affordable housing mix. So moving on to some detail. So this is the southern portion of this reserve matters site, known as, I guess, as Jordan South. The Gypsy and Traveller site is not part of this reserve matters application. That's in the southwestern corner. That will be considered as part of the third reserve matters application. This is a more informal part of the development. There's no primary road running through it. The road coming through to the top is known as a secondary road, and that tapers off into shared drives, which will be more blocked paved to give a clear sense of the different hierarchy to the streets. And the different colours of the buildings themselves, they represent the different build characters. So we have more of an informal layout with the red properties where they border the kind of the parkland, and the brown is green edge housing, and grey is known as neighbourhood housing. So they correspond to the different street hierarchies and create variety, as well as being appropriate to their particular contexts. Children, so the northern parts of this site, this does have the primary road running through it, where you can then see the blue houses. The blue houses would have that greater proportion of 2.5 stories next to that primary road, and the red dwellings, again, that 2 stories, more informal, organic layout next to the parkland, and there's good links to the green spaces proposed. And then finally, the eastern portion, you can see the end of the linear path that cuts across the site here, and again the different house types, the variation in street hierarchies and typologies of dwellings will create a lot of interest across the development site. The case officer with the urban design officer has worked exceptionally hard to secure important design improvements, And there are a couple of examples I'd like to present to members. One here centrally in the site, we can see an improved focal space where it's been enlarged. There will be seating. There are also opportunities for people to rest. And the yellow trees are the feature trees, so immediately larger trees that will provide that immediate impact, but also some shading for the people using that kind of focal space. And the next slide shows the type of work that the case officer has been doing with the urban design officer in terms of reducing the parking concentrations across the sites. And you can see the difference in the before and after on the screen. This shows the members the tenure plan. So we have the affordable rent in red and the shared ownership in blue. And as indicated on that drawing, we can see that there's no there's not one parcel which is wholly affordable housing. It is spread across the entirety of the site, with the anticipation that the appearance will be tenure blind. This is a building heights plan. As I've indicated, the 2.5-storey dwellings will be located primarily along the main movement corridors. And they're also located along some edges to the linear park for some better centering surveillance and stronger frontage. The flatted developments, they will be 3-storey, and as I've indicated on the red triangles, their location. The majority of dwellings, 66% will be 2-storey, 19% will be 2.5, and 15% will be 3-storey. And they're contained within those 5 apartment blocks. In terms of the mix of material palette, it complies with the materials indicated in the approved urban design framework on the hybrid planning application. The mix will create a variety and interest across the site. There are some street scenes. Obviously, the site does slope, so officers secured a considerable number of street scenes so that officers could be satisfied that the development works cohesively together along particular street scenes. I've just circled the flatted block in the middle of the middle street scene. That was changed. Previously, all 5 flatted blocks were the render, as you can see on the top. This one, on the request of officers, was changed to tile hanging, again, to increase the variety and interest. There's a mix of 2.5-storey dwellings, as I say, located along the main movement corridors. And some further street scenes, also to help members to have an appreciation of the materiality of the dwellings. Noting the kind of the slope within the site, there are design solutions that can be introduced to ensure the appropriate residential is secured, both in terms of having a usable garden space on terraces, but also ensuring privacy implications. And one of the conditions imposed seeks a schedule of where we need those garden section details, and then the submission of those details on those sensitive locations. Moving on to the flatted blocks, these are the 3-storey developments. They've been amended to include much more detailing, sill details, hip roofs to break up the form, extending the proportion of brickwork. And here we can see the blocks. The floor plans, they each contain 3 2-bed apartments and 6 1-bed apartments. With, as I've mentioned, one of the apartment blocks being changed to tile hanging for variety. And just to emphasize that the landscaping elements, other than those that fall within the red outline of this reserved matters site, there's a considerable amount of landscaping that will come before members in September. But officers have worked hard to ensure the connectivity between those spaces and the accessibility of attenuation basins, etc. And the overall, well, there is an over provision of open space compared to the policy requirement. So the next slides, if you can flick through, that they provide some of the detail that will come forward in September. So next. And again. Yep, and the attenuation basins. So, yep, so the application is delegated with a view to approval, subject to the conditions and a deed of variation to the unilateral undertaking attached to discharge a condition in relation to the Chiltern Beechwoods SAC. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Philip. That was a canter through a huge amount of work that's been done here. Well done, thank you. Right, who's going to open the discussion?
Yeah, I don't think there's a great deal to discuss. Obviously, a lot of work has gone in. It seems to be quite a high quality of design overall. If we were to decline this on any basis, it would throw the entire council into chaos. I would like to support the motion to delegate with a view to approval.
Thank you. Can we park that for the moment?
I only press my button to second the motion to grant.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, I was just picking up on some of the elements in the highways commentary about access onto Chiltern Lane by tenders, emergency vehicles, and the cycle path. Have they been at all addressed or considered through this process? So the concern was that the access by emergency vehicles and cyclists was not at 90 degrees to Chiltern Lane, and that was a significant issue in terms of safety for cyclists, but also the turning circle, the sweep, I think was the term used for emergency vehicles.
Unfortunately, I don't have that information before me. I'm aware of there were a number of concerns raised by Hertfordshire Highways that resulted in a comprehensive response submitted by the applicants, providing new visibility display information, spec path analysis, and the response, it's in paragraph 9.103, response to comments surrounding off-site cycle and footways, which join onto existing public rights of ways. And I know that ultimately the county was satisfied with the additional details submitted. Whether they exactly encompass the points you've raised, I can't say for sure, but certainly there seems to have been a comprehensive response to the highways concerns, and the highways have now confirmed that they don't wish to restrict approval of the development.
And the other consideration that concerns me as a local ward councillor is the road safety in the surrounding roads as a result of the extra traffic. I note that the section 106 agreement has certain improvements on road safety, particularly junctions on Fishery Road and London Road on the main route towards the station. That seems to have taken into account the safety of commuters walking to the station from this development. But I wonder whether a similar consideration has been taken for the safety of particularly school children or people walking to town at those junctions. So I know that there's currently a lot of concerns about pedestrian safety on Northridge Way without these new vehicles. And so I wonder whether there's any, I know at this late stage, whether there's any consideration can be brought into discussions with the developer about having a look at those safety aspects again. Or is it too late?
Yes, in terms of off-site works, they will have, as you say, there's a lengthy Section 106 agreement that details those off-site works, and there's clauses within the 106 in terms of the trigger points by which they have to be achieved. So in terms of the inclusion of additional off-site works, then yes, then it would be too late, because that 106 has been agreed at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Doris.
Very small point. You mentioned I think it was 3 feature trees that are going to be developed. I wasn't quite sure whether they are going to be sort of in a grassed area or whether they're going to be sort of near to a footpath. If they're near to a footpath or something similar, can we just give some consideration to the root structure of it as they develop, so that they don't actually break up any footpath or any walking area? That's all.
Yes, absolutely. And there are further conditions that need to be discharged for this phase in respect of the planting specification. So that will be a key point, and something that Luke Johnson, as the tree officer, will, I'm sure, be on top of.
Any further comments? Right, in which case, we've got a proposer for the officer's recommendation from Councillor Bristow. We've got it seconded by Councillor Williams. Can I have a show of hands, those in favour of officer's recommendation? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to abstain. And we have 1 not able to vote. That's it. Thank you. Moving swiftly on, item 5C. And 5C is on page 412. And Andrew, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, the application seeks to vary the list of approved plans under condition 29 of the permission that was granted in April 2017 under planning reference 3378/16 ROC in respect of 325 dwellings at the Manor Estate, Apsley. The amendment is specifically in respect of the substitution of 30 dwellings of a different type, layout and appearance to those currently permitted on the last phase of the development, phase 5, on the part of the allocation known as TWA3. There's no change in the number of dwellings on phase 5, which remains at 30. And the mix is evenly spread across the full range of 1 to 4 bed units, very similar to the consented mix on phase 5. Why is it at committee? It's a large-scale major which is linked to an existing section 106 planning obligation. Turning to the update sheet, members should refer to the addendum sheet for an update from the Highway Authority. Amended plans and conditions and an additional compliance condition in respect to visibility displays. There's one correction to the report, which is at paragraph 9.78. This states that an appropriate assessment has been completed. However, this is not the case. As noted in this paragraph, the Habitats Regulation Assessment screening exercise has screened the application out because of the because the permission was implemented prior to 14th of March 2022, and therefore forms part of the baseline of HRA impact on the special area of conservation. As such, an appropriate assessment is not necessary. Turning to the location plan here, so the site wraps around the existing Manor estate in a C shape as shown here. The area of amendment relates only to the northern part of the site of Featherbed Lane, known as TWA3, which you can see on that plan. On the next slide, this is the aerial view as shown in this view. TWA4 to the south and west of the Manor estate is largely complete, although the roads have yet to be adopted. And the small area to the north, marked as TWA3, the last phase, remains to be built out. So that is the phase that they wish to amend. On the next slide, this is a oblique aerial view of that part of the site. It shows the East Coast Mainline Railway running in a cutting to the east of the site. Featherbed Lane runs along the northern boundary of the site, which is to the south of us, which is the bottom of the bottom right as we look at it. Manorville Road properties abut the southeastern boundary, which is the, of course, the top of the photograph, and Homewood sits to the southwest of the site, which is to the right, top right. On the next slide, this is the overall site layout. As I say, this was granted back in originally 2010, and then subsequently under an amendment 2017. So the plan shows the overall site layout. TWA4 remains as approved, and TWA3 is a part to be amended. This photo shows the TWA3 site context from Featherbed Lane. Manorville Road properties and the existing Swan Neck are very clear to be seen. And the site itself is to the right of the far right of the photograph. In the next view, this is of the site from the railway bridge from, with Homewood beyond. So the site is beyond this bit of land that the camera stood on, and with these sort of embankments in the sort of mid-distance. This is the close-up view of the Swan Neck, shows the existing access to be retained. Those bollards won't be part of the new development, and they'll be removed. The next image shows the existing trees to be retained on the Manorville Road, rear of Manorville Road properties. There'll be some trimming back to those. And this view is from Featherbed Lane and shows the existing access on that road to be closed off. And also, that's a close-up view of that access with the trees beyond along the Manorville Road rear boundary. This is a view of looking up Featherbed Lane with the footpath connection to Homewood, which is to be secured under the Section 106. That will go next to, alongside one of the last property at the back of the site. This is looking along down Featherbed Lane towards the bridge and shows the crossing point where the public right-of-way 138 connects, and to which a new footpath connection will be made from the site, details of which to be approved under condition 32. The next photograph, this is the location of the 4-bay car park off the Swan Neck. where highways were requesting visibility displays to be provided and shown on plan. This one is the view of the site towards the railway bridge, and this actually shows the 1.9 metre high wall abutting the railway embankment in the far distance where those chevrons are. And this is the two properties, 8 and 10 Manorville Road, from the Swan Neck, which Condition 8 seeks to address in terms of improving their privacy from the public realm, from members of the public using the highway. So there would be, we'd be looking at some raised fencing, which would be in consultation with the residents concerned, and beefing up the landscaping there rather than having the scrub vegetation which is there at the moment. So this is the consented layout for TWA3, which is to be replaced, and the next slide shows the amended scheme. You can see I've marked on there the connection to public right-of-way 138 from the site, and that crossing point on Featherbed Lane, and also the other connection to Homewood, which goes alongside one of the properties there, and is DDA compliant in terms of the steps and landings shown there. So this is just an idea of the landscape proposal. We will be seeking further details under Condition 19. Sorry, not Condition 9, Condition 6. On the next slide, this is the parking layout. So this shows 57 spaces proposed, of which 19 will be unallocated or visitor spaces. This is slightly below the SPD requirement of 71.4 spaces, but nevertheless represents an uplift on the consented 47 spaces, and therefore is a material improvement. This is the refuse tracking plan, which has been recently updated to omit the pedestrian refuges, which were simply just different coloured bits of tarmac. And this ensures that highways are satisfied that the tracking of the vehicles don't interfere with pedestrians. As such, it will be a completely shared route with no footpaths as such. And this is the next vehicle, the next slide here is just the standard vehicle tracking for cars, showing that can be achieved. And the next slide, this is an analysis of windows in the scheme, showing that through various measures there will be no material overlooking between dwellings within the scheme. There's various measures there, including oriel windows with obscure glass to prevent mutual overlooking. The next slide, this is the drainage strategy, which will be subject of a compliance condition under Condition 11. And it does show a SUD system there. And the next slide, please, is the couple of street scenes of the existing and the proposed. The existing extant scheme is at the bottom. Proposed is at the top. Unfortunately, it's not very clear, but there is a ghosted outline of a roof on the top view, which is the level at which the bottom view would have appeared. So you can see that the roof levels have been substantially lowered compared to the consented scheme. Looking at this diagram showing two sections through house type A and house type C. So this is basically showing that with the excavations proposed, particularly on house type C, which backs onto the Manorville Road properties, effectively there won't be any more than a bungalow in terms of their height, perceived height from those properties. The following 12 slides show the floor plans and elevations of the 6 house types, including the materials for each. I won't dwell on these very much, and we'll just go through them, but if you want to come back to them, we can. So, sorry, that previous slide, that was just the palette of materials put together, which comprises a mix of brick and tile, and Peterson hanging tile, which is the two on the right, the red and the sort of grey colour, and plus hardy board vertical siding. So these are the CGI sort of part of the design and access statement. So this is the view from Featherbed Lane Bridge, which demonstrates that the external materials would be suitably low key against the woodland context and not really stand out prominently. And the next slide is kind of an aerial visualization, just to give an idea of its appearance, obviously from a bird's eye view, which is not a normally perceived view. Nevertheless, gives you an idea of how it's laid out. This is the communal gardens view through the communal garden area where there's the type B dwellings are. The arrow on the little diagram below shows where that view is from. And again, the materials give a sort of rural vernacular that helps sort of reinforce a landscape setting. This view is from the Swan Neck itself and is looking at the main entrance to the site. And this one is a couple of sequential views along the access. Again, the two arrows on the little diagrams there show where they're taken from. And this one is a view between the type B properties and the XC block, where you've got undercroft parking garages. Again, the arrow shows where that's taken from. Turning to the last slide. So the recommendation is on pages 435 to 446. And the recommendation is to delegate with a view to approval subject to the completion of the deed of variation to the existing section 106 agreement and the conditions listed as amended in the addendum sheet. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, members, over to you. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, something you said earlier on suggested there was a difference in the, the size of the properties. There's not a change in the number, but there's a change in the balance of different sizes. Does that have any impact on the affordability or elements of the development?
Yeah, there is no change in the number of dwellings. It's not quite true to say there's a change in the mix of dwellings. The mix is very similar to the approved scheme. So it's a mix of 1 to 4 bedrooms, that is very similar to the approved scheme. So the affordability is you know, you've got the 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms, so they'll be more affordable, obviously, to those who can't afford a 3-bed or a 4-bed.
Well, I suppose that's what I'm driving at is there a reduction in the smaller units in favour of larger units? And in that?
No, I mean, if you, I don't know whether you can turn to the parking plan. That gives, should give you the, if indeed you can see, if you keep going back, yeah, there we go. It's not very easy to see. Sorry, actually, if you look at the agenda, there's a table in there that will give you a breakdown of the dwelling sizes in the first column.
Yes, I saw that, but I was a bit baffled by what the later columns.
Yeah, sorry, it's quite complicated because the SPD parking standards allow for both allocated and unallocated, and there's a different standard for both, which is why you've got all those columns in there. But my point is that the second column gives you the spread of the different sized dwellings. So there's 8 1 bed, 6 2 bed or maisonette. Sorry, 6 2 bed maisonettes, 6 3 beds and 10 4 beds.
And that, I suppose what I'm driving at is there's still going to be a required level of smaller developments that are affordable to, you know, new starters as there was intended under the last iteration.
Absolutely, there's not really any change in the mix of units.
Thank you.
Next. Well, in the absence of any further comments or observations, can I request whether we have got a proposer for officer's recommendation? Councillor Williams. A seconder. I think Councillor Allen just beat you to it, Councillor Doris. In which case, can I have a show of hands, those in favour of officers' recommendations? 1, 2. Show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. That's unanimous except for 1 abstention. Right. 7. Thank you. Right. We've done 5D. Moving on to 5E. I think Councillor Allen might have something to say on this one.
Yes, this is my property, so I will withdraw from proceedings. Do you need me to sit somewhere else to make it obvious that I'm removing myself from the committee?
I think you may stay there. I won't call you to speak.
Okay. And of course, I won't be contributing or voting.
Yep, I will cover this one, Chair. So this application, 65 St John's Road, there is a couple of errors on the report in terms of the reason for referral. I think it refers to Councillor Allen as an employee of the council. It's called into committee as it's an application from a ward councillor. And paragraph 9.8, it refers to a plastic layer, that should be a plasterboard layer. Yet there are no other late items. So moving on to the slides, this is a listed building consent application. None of the works require planning permission for repointing of the flint wall, installation of French drain around the building exterior, and remodelling of the staircase. Essentially, the works are to deal with issues of damp at the property, and the French drain and the staircase, the conservation officers have agreed these are very good solutions, and there was some concern about the internal plasterboardings, but the conservation officer visited the site and has agreed again that there's no harm at all to the listed building. So I think there's only about 4 slides. So yeah, next one. So this is the works to the flint wall. Next, we have an explanation of the damp concerns. Next, the French drain solution. The existing staircase and the reconfigured staircase on elevation. And to finish, this application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Philip. Councillor Doris.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This has come to this committee because the applicant is an elected member of this council. If the applicant wasn't an elected member of this council or an employee of this council, it wouldn't come to this committee, I'm quite sure. There's no other reason indicated for it to come to this committee, and on that basis, I propose the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Doris. If there are no further comments, I was going to... Seconding. Those in favour of officer's recommendation, please show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. I'm abstaining. Right. Right, moving swiftly on. Item 6, appeals update.
Thank you, Chair. So this appeals update covers the just hoping to get my covers the period between the 1st of June and the 31st of July. Very slow laptop. No, there's no slides. So it covers the period between 1st of June and 31st of July. So it does just miss out the appeal decision on land west of Leighton Buzzard Road, which was an August decision. So that will be included in the appeals update, likely in the next committee. So in terms of this time period, there were 7 appeals received, including the appeal for the refusal at Development Management Committee in line with the officer recommendation at Tufts Farm, Tower Hill. That was an application for 4 new dwellings. Overall, there's considerably less appeals received this year. As a demonstration, by the end of July, we've received 29 appeals. In 2024, we had received 53, and in 2023, 52 by this period. In terms of planning appeals dismissed, it's very good to see a long list of planning appeals dismissed. If we look at number 4, this is End Oak in Bovingdon. With the kind of bronze colouring, that indicates that this was a DMC refusal in line with officer recommendation. The inspector agreed that the redevelopment wasn't a more compact arrangement than the existing. There was a significant greater floor space, greater span, etc., resulting in a greenbelt harm. But the inspector also concluded that the house 3 affected the character and appearance of the area and gave limited weight to the permitted development fallback position. So an interesting decision there. Number 7 is Tower Hill in Chipperfield. This is an interesting example of how the inspector went through the greenbelt analysis, and I encourage members to click on that link to go through that analysis with the inspector. Went through the paragraph 155 tests, in particular concluded that the site was in a sustainable location. And ultimately concluded that it wasn't inappropriate. But what's interesting here is that although the absence of a greenbelt harm or inappropriateness doesn't automatically make a scheme acceptable, it still needs to be considered under other material planning considerations. And in this case, there was harm to the character and appearance of the area. It was against the prevailing pattern of development. The gardens were uncharacteristically small, and that harm, in the view of the inspector, significantly and demonstrably outweighed the benefits in terms of housing delivery in particular. And then finally, there were a couple of appeals at Greymantle that were decided in the period, both dismissed. The first one was a lawful development certificate. Both appeals related to 2 outbuildings. In the lawful development certificate, the inspector concluded that that the roof form meant that it needed to be considered on a 3-meter height limit, and it exceeded that. On the planning application side, the inspector concluded that it was substantially at odds with the spacious and verdant character of the locality. So, so it refused or dismissed both appeals. Moving on to the allowed appeals. Again, it's very good to see a much shorter list. One Dale End in Box Lane was a very disappointing decision from an officer perspective. The inspector effectively concluded there was less than substantial harm to the listed building, and that was outweighed by the public benefits. There was no harm to the character of the area, no harm to neighbours, no harm to refuse collection, safety, and ultimately gave quite considerable weight to, the provision of 8 dwellings carried significant weight in the inspector's planning balance in light of the council's housing shortfall. And the second one there is the Cuthbert Main School, which was a refusal at DMC, contrary to officer's recommendation. In this case, the inspector concluded that the separation distances were substantial and couldn't substantiate an overbearing argument. The inspector accepted that their outlook was altered, but didn't consider this to be visual intrusion, and felt that noise could be suitably controlled by conditions limiting hours, and there would be very limited occasions for kind of unsociable or noise nuisance. In terms of enforcement, it's good to see decisions coming through. There's 3 dismissed. I think the most interesting one there is the Aberley Meadows, a dismissed appeal against the placement of a shipping container with a kind of a planning geek hat on. It's quite an interesting one in terms of how you define development and the 3 tests that you have to apply in terms of size, physical attachment to the ground, and degree of permanence. And the inspector went through these one by one and concluded that it was a building, and then moved on to assess the impact of the building on the national landscape and considered that it would cause harm. So that was a very good appeal decision, one we can rely on, hopefully for similar shipping containers. The allowed appeal was allowed purely in terms of ground G, which gave the appellant more time to comply, and in respect of the change of use. But in terms of the operational development, the erection of the fence and the laying of hard standing, the appellant still needs to comply with the enforcement notice, albeit has more time to do so. In terms of the statistics in 6.9, as I've mentioned, appeals lodged is less than the previous 2 years considerably. Appeals decided, a very, very good appeals performance, having 3/4 of appeals dismissed. There is an underlying concern, however, in terms of majors with the land west of Leighton Buzzard Road, the St Cuthbert Main, and there are 2 outstanding SANG majors to be decided by the Planning Inspectorate. So there is concern in terms of exceeding the government threshold of the kind of the quality of decision making should those appeals go against the council. But the overarching picture is a very high dismissal rate. And then finally, just to note, there is one upcoming inquiry, and there was the one application for costs relating to the appeal at One-Dale End was refused. The appellant made an application for costs, which was refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Philip. Councillor Doris.
Just a quick question. Are inspectors' decisions moderated at all before they actually come out? And secondly, have you noticed any variation between inspectors on their decision making? Or are they pretty all level consistent?
I've not personally analysed kind of dismissal rate by inspector. I think there's a general consistency in terms of the push towards granting schemes involving housing, particularly where their authorities can't demonstrate their housing land supply, and I think that's a consistent message coming through. I would imagine that there is some kind of moderation. Either some less experienced inspectors would have their reports reviewed, and the more contentious, controversial applications that could be likely to challenge I'm sure would go through some kind of legal check as well as a senior inspectorate check. So I would imagine there is some kind of moderation, but I don't know the details.
You mentioned that we're maybe sailing close to the wind with our level of appeals being upheld. How close to the wind, and what difference would the ones that you said were pending make to that situation?
According to my calculations and the figures, it's kind of a complicated calculation that will depend on appeal decisions received for the rest of the calendar year, and then we're informed of March. We're informed in March of our position. But according to my calculations, we are 1 allowed appeal below the threshold. So 1 further allowed appeal would take us above the threshold.
And is there the implication that you fear that the SANG issue might go against us?
Lots of the councils argued its case strongly in those appeals, but the officer's view was that they were acceptable schemes. I guess from an officer perspective, we wouldn't be unsurprised if those appeals were allowed. I mean, the implications would be that we would be at risk of designation for exceeding that 10% threshold. And the worst case scenario is that they could designate the local planning authority and give the applicants the right to submit applications direct to the planning inspectorate, so bypassing local decision making. And on top of that, the whole planning application fee would go to the planning inspectorate, though the local planning authority would still have to do all the administrative work of consultations and collation of responses. Which is why we had the member training, and I'm speaking to Councillor Stevens in terms of a further programme, and essentially creating a series of messages and points that can demonstrate that should we be in that position come April, that steps are already in place to improve that decision-making performance, and that there would be no reason to designate this authority based on the proactive measures we've taken in the last 9 months, 12 months.
Right, before we leave, on page 547 is a list of planning enforcement action status reports. So, Tobias will welcome any conversations on this by email rather than a further debate on any of them.
I think, Tobias had a couple of photographs of before and afters, but we'll very quickly rattle through it.
I can be really loud. That might just help. We get there. I won't be too long. Thank you, Chair and members, councillors. Basically, we just want to make sure you don't forget planning enforcement is here, and we just want to show you some of the work we do. Obviously, it was mentioned earlier. We do try and correct things where things go wrong. So one of the examples is some windows above the meeting room restaurant in Berkhamsted. There's small changes, but because of the change it makes, the window fenestration has been changed. It was unauthorized on the left-hand side where it says before, and you see, well, if you're in and around Berkhamsted, it's probably easier to see than on this picture. But we've secured a better visual outcome for quite a prominent building. And another one in High Street Markyate that the enforcement team actively engaged for better outcome is on this listed building, very prominent on the High Street with a very prominent entrance porch, which is also part of the listing, was taken off. There was some issues structurally, and we worked with the applicant to make sure that the porch is rebuilt, and you see the after image, which shows the renewed and rebuilt as before, or as originally built the porch, which is very handsome. Again, just in your own time, we do provide an update on some of the cases. I won't go through them, but we will always welcome, if you want to engage with us, please contact us. Planning enforcement, unfortunately, is not for those with impatience. A lot of the work we do in Frankton may take forever, and we may have to do quite a bit of work. But if you have any questions, or please do get in touch. Also, just to let you know, Kyle has left us, and we have a replacement with Caroline. So we've got a good team in place. So do please get in touch if you have any specific questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tobias. Right. Phil, should we just note the reports that you've just made on planning appeals, etc.? Noted. Right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And although it was a heavy agenda, we've just cracked